Bare land that's been created by volcanic eruptions or other geologic events is transformed over time into habitats that organisms can occupy via primary succession. One of the important first steps is the formation of soil, which is typically a material that consists of organic remains, clay, and rock particles in different concentrations. How does soil form? There are equally important chemical, physical, and biological components. The chemical and physical consist of weathering rock, while the biological is the accumulation of organic material from decaying organisms. The rate of formation of soil has a lot to do with climate and environment. Typically, places like deserts that experience extremes in temperature and water availability will have the slowest soil formation rates. By comparing data from physical environments, we can make accurate, educated guesses about the type of soil in that location. Compare, for example, these two maps, which show global annual precipitation below and global temperature, here given as deviation from average temperature above. There are lots of different types of soil, and historically there's been a lot of disagreement over how many there are. However, there are a fixed number of processes that produce all the different types, and we call these processes pedogenic regimes. Podzoilization is the first of 4 pedogenic regimes. This process occurs in temperate and subarctic elevations and latitudes that experience cool temperatures and lots of precipitation. Often, the climate means that there's abundant plant life, but the temperatures are just a little too cold for microbes to thrive. So when plants die, their remains build up into a layer called humus. Decaying humus typically produces acidic soils and leaches away important soil nutrients like calcium, potassium, and sodium. Laterization is the second of the 4 pedogenic regimes. This process occurs when temperatures are high and there's lots of precipitation, so it's primarily restricted to the tropics. Microbes are especially active here and eagerly gobble up organic remains so humus doesn't accumulate. Usually, a red clay layer called laterite forms, and the heavy precipitation itself leaches many important nutrients like calcium, potassium, and sodium out of the soil. Calcification is the third of 4 pedogenic regimes. This is our primary regime, as it occurs in arid and semi-arid environments where precipitation is low. In arid environments like deserts, precipitation doesn't penetrate far beneath the surface, and a hard layer of calcium carbonate forms. But in areas where water from precipitation penetrates farther, rich, deep soils that are rich in organic materials and nutrients like potassium, calcium, and nitrogen form. Those sorts of soils are commonly found in prairies and grasslands. Glaciation is the fourth of the 4 pedogenic regimes. This process occurs in cold, wet environments, typically closer to the poles or very high up. The surface is usually either permanently wet or frozen, and even though there's abundant moisture, the low temperatures inhibit microbial activity, so decomposition happens slowly. The non-decomposed layer of vegetation, called peat, builds up, sometimes up to several meters thick. Below the peat, there's usually a layer of gray clay and very acidic conditions. Vegetation and climate both produce soils and are produced by soils. In other words, soils are formed by the death and decomposition of plants, but the type of soil also determines what plants can grow in an environment. Therefore, shifting soil types are an important part of succession, whether you're looking at primary succession or secondary succession. While vegetation and soils are inextricably linked, there are plenty of organisms that aren't plants whose distributions are directly determined by soil type. Animals, especially below-ground animals, are restricted by requirements for burrowing, locomotion, and resource use. Taxa that are adapted to sandy soils, like the kangaroo rat on the left, can't thrive on rocky hillsides, and taxa that are adapted to rocky hillsides, like the rock pocket mouse on the right, couldn't cope with sandy soils.